All right, I am pumped to be joined as always by the Hall of Famer John Smoltz today. John, how we doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. So I want to ask, last weekend when you were on the call, as you always are every weekend, you had a comment that created, I would say, quite the stir on social media, especially in the analytical world. And you had a lot of people agreeing, a lot of people disagreeing. But the comment was essentially, in the analytical world, they don't think the scoreboard matters. And I just wanted to talk about that. What did you mean by that, and how would you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we have data that has quantifiable information, right? And we've talked about before, like if everything was neutral, everything was in a dome, everything was the same, it might be more applicable across the board. But managers who will tell you that scoreboard is very important. Pitchers will tell you, hitters will tell you, strategy changes. And I think there's some narrative that that's irrelevant. And for all the players who have ever played the game, they know that the scoreboard matters. It matters on who you bring in. It matters how you play the game. If you're 4 runs down, you're going to play the game differently on both
Yep.
sides of the ball. And to say that that shouldn't matter is just a computer spit out. It's not somebody who's ever played the game to realize that having been there, done that, and seeing what the differences are is night and day.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I was talking about. And, you could tell that when you're playing the Cleveland Guardians, if you don't think the scoreboard matters when you enter the sixth inning and you're trailing against them,
Yeah.
then you're sadly mistaken to think that that is not going to be an advantage for the Cleveland Guardians, who basically locked down every game from the seventh inning on. So there's a lot of things that we can quantify today, but not everything's an absolute, and not everything can discard certain things like that.
Would you, as a pitcher, if you're facing a lineup, if you've game planned for a lineup before the game, and the next thing you know, you're heading back out for the second inning and you have a 4-0 lead or a 6-0 lead, are you attacking a lineup differently than maybe you had previously game planned for?
Absolutely. I don't see
Yeah.
why you would not look at that. I think you're missing opportunities if you're going to mess around and walk people and give them free bases up for nothing just because you can and just because you're not going to deviate, then you're going to bring them back in the ball game. And the biggest time that it matters is when you got a closer coming in with a 3-run lead, or 2-run lead, or a 1-run lead. If you don't think that the guys on deck matter in a 3-run lead, 2-run lead, or a 1-run lead, there's different strategies that you approach. And I'll tell you, just from my own experience, when I had a 3-run lead, I was attacking the first and second hitter until the tying run got on deck, and that's all you think about. And in a 1-run game, the tying runs at the plate, so
Yeah.
that strategy changes. You can't necessarily just throw pitches down the middle. And what I'm not advocating is that if you have a 4-run lead, you just throw pitches down the middle and you just abort your game plan. But what I'm saying is it's a lot easier to pitch with a 4-run lead than down four.
Yep. Absolutely makes sense to me. I've also we've talked about it before, but in the sense of analytics and baseball, I do think the game went a bit too far in one direction of not even having feel of what's happening and really just what does this number say? And I think we started to realize as a game, and some teams have realized it quicker than others, but it's important to have somebody in the dugout that has some feel of the game and feel of players on the field that are allowed to, okay, like maybe this piece of paper says to position here, but I kind of have an understanding of the game and I'm going to do this. So just the game getting back to a little bit of, okay, maybe I'm not going to do exactly what all of these numbers spit out from a computer are going to tell me what to do.
Well, I can promise you this: if I was managing and somebody gave me 100% guarantee, I'm going to go with it every single time. If there's 100%, I'm doing it. If it's 80, sometimes you got to use 10% of your field, right? And I think that's what the blend is starting to show.
Exactly.
Information's great, but if you give me 100%, I promise you I will not deviate from the 100%.
John, let's talk NL MVP race. For a while, I would say it has been Shohei Ohtani's. The pretty big favorite in the National League to win the award. But now we have Ketel Marte out there in Arizona entering this race, and he is on an absolute tear, narrowing that gap definitely. So, what I want to ask you is a little bit less about that particular race, because obviously we'll see how it shakes out. But in general, how much of an advantage do you think a position player should have over a DH? I mean, we're kind of in uncharted territory here with a DH heading to his first ever MVP as just a designated hitter and the first in history. So how much of an advantage should a position player have when it comes to this race?
I think he should have a decided advantage if it's close. I don't think that if it's not close, you can pick up the gap just because you play two ways. But playing two ways is obviously more impactful on your team because of the ability to affect the game on both sides. And I'll say this, I'll tell you what else has a bigger impact is if you are single-handedly putting your team in a playoff race or helping your team get to a playoff race versus the expected player who's already on a really good team. That will hurt Shohei Ohtani a little bit because the Dodgers are already great. And for Shohei right now, he's come back a little bit like every hitter will, just a little bit leveling off. But I agree with you. If you're a position player and you have the ability to impact the game on both sides, you should have an advantage.
Yeah. John, it's interesting from Shohei's perspective when he was with the Angels trying to get MVP awards. It was, well, you can't win the MVP with a team that stinks. How good is he? How valuable really is he? And now that he's with the Dodgers, it's, well, how much is he really providing for a team that was already going to be in the playoffs? It's like the guy can't win when it comes to how much value he's providing for his team, whether they really stink or whether they're really good.
Well, that narrative should only come down to tie-breaking scenarios, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's only should be like if you've already reached two other tie-breaking scenarios and you can't get a winner, then unfortunately that works for you or against you based on the team you are. I've always said you should be able to win the MVP on the last place team.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're close with another competitor who has basically helped that team get to the postseason for one reason or another, that should help that player in a tight tie situation.
Yeah. Well, all I know is the Diamondbacks were in the World Series last year, not playing good baseball this year, and now they have been one of the best teams in baseball for a little while, and Ketel Marte is a big part of that. And the Diamondbacks right now are looking pretty good and hoping to grab a playoff spot.
They are, and they're going to use that momentum. Look, you're only as good as using the experience you had when you can put yourself in that position. They weren't playing great baseball. Having gone to the World Series last year didn't guarantee him anything. But when you're in that run right now that helps, right? Because now the stretch run, you did that last year. So there's no guarantees, but it helps when you've been there, done that, and you put yourself in that position.
Yeah. John, we're now in the second half of the season, post All-Star break. We are post trade deadline as well. Sitting here today, you and I talking, who would you say is a team that maybe you weren't worried about a month ago, but you're becoming increasingly more and more worried about as we get into middle of August?
As far as them struggling to make the playoffs?
Yeah.
I think the team that I'm familiar with is the Atlanta Braves.
Yep.
They've had really peaks and valleys. They've hit the skids of late. Their offense has to cover some things. They're relying heavily on two starting pitchers, basically, but everybody's trying to contribute. They're in a tough spot with teams who are really, really hot right now. You mentioned one of them, the Diamondbacks. Of course, the Padres are extremely hot as well. And so you've got a log jam with that third spot. So a lot's going to come down with the head-to-head against the Philadelphia Phillies, which they've got coming up here in August, and then of course against the Mets. So that would be the team right now because of all their injuries that I would be concerned about.
Yeah, you look at the Atlanta Braves right now as we're talking, and they're holding on to that last third and final wild card spot in the National League. And that NL West is obviously the Phillies at the top, the Mets right on their heels, and there's a bunch of other teams around them. So it is no guarantee that the Atlanta Braves are going to be in the playoffs. That's for sure.
Yeah, it definitely, they're going to have their work cut out for them.
John, always a pleasure, my friend. Really appreciate it. Travel safely for this weekend, and we'll do it all again next week.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
Thanks.
See you, John. Thanks, man. All right, just wanted to thank John Smoltz again for joining us here on Flippin' Bats, as he does every single Saturday. This one was fun. Last weekend during his call during Saturday baseball game, he did talk about the analytical world, and we've discussed it before on here, but it did kind of stir up a lot because I don't think a lot of people really understood him, I'd say. So to be able to talk through it, I mean, there's not a world in which it doesn't make sense what he's saying. Obviously, the scoreboard affects what you're doing on the field and how you go about it. And you might be game planning one way, but a scoreboard might tell you to do it another way. And that's just the way it's always been in the game of baseball. And it's good to be able to talk to him about that. So obviously the NL MVP race is tightening up. Shohei has had the lead for the majority of the season. Ketel Marte has been really, really good of late. And yeah, as he mentioned, Braves are struggling. So thanks, as always, to John Smoltz. Thank you all for listening, as always, as well. Please make sure you're subscribed, following wherever you listen to your podcast. Give us a 5-star review if you want. No big deal. And follow us on all social media, including YouTube, where you can watch every single thing we do on our YouTube channel, Flippin' Bats Pod. Really appreciate it. We will be back next week. Enjoy the weekend, everyone, and thank you for listening. Saturday with Smoltz. Until next time, my friends, remember, find your bat and flip it. Peace.